5 months. That's all the time my husband and I have been married, but lately, it feels like everything is crumbling. There's a constant cycle of shouting, and more often than not, I'm left crying, wondering if this is what love is supposed to feel like. I'm at a loss. I don't know what to do anymore. This situation, the tension, the confusion, it's all consuming, and I'm searching for guidance. For comfort. I'm trapped in this whirlwind, unsure of how to move forward. I'm 29, a Canadian woman, and he's also 29, Egyptian Canadian. We met back in early 2021 through a dating app, though we already shared mutual friends from university. The connection was immediate. And fast. I fell for him so quickly, and after a year, we were engaged. It felt like everything was falling into place. After another year, we tied the knot with a simple, intimate ceremony. Only our immediate family was there. A few months later, we had our wedding reception planned, and I was excited, but also overwhelmed. The stress was starting to build, and with it, cracks began to show. Just months before, we bought our first home, and both of us were working in high-pressure environments. His new job, my job, everything seemed to collide. I see it now. I see how I wasn't the best version of myself, stretched thin, exhausted, just trying to keep up. I thought I could handle it all, but I was wrong. And then, the red flag started. My husband, who had always been so charismatic and funny, started changing. That loud, vibrant personality I had once adored was now consumed by rants about politics. His tone, often filled with right-wing conspiracies, felt jarring, too much. And when I tried to engage, it always turned into an argument. No matter what stance I took, it ended in a fight. But the worst part? The personal attacks. He started shouting more frequently, and it wasn't just the volume, it was the cruelty. The other day, it was in front of his family. It was humiliating. I couldn't hold back the tears. The argument started when his family told me the seating chart was already done, even though they didn't have the full guest list. I tried to explain that I needed to work off the draft I had, one that included all the guests. I reassured his mom she could rearrange things if anything was wrong. But then he jumped in, from another room, shouting at me for suggesting she didn't know who was coming. He shouted again that he wasn't shouting, we were shouting. I couldn't let it slide. I called him out. I told him it was immature, especially in front of our nephews. I told him, if he was going to keep yelling, he should stay out of it. It was wrong. I couldn't keep ignoring the behavior. After finishing the seating chart, I left. I needed space. So, I went to my parents' place. It's been hours now, 5 hours to be exact, and I haven't heard from him. When I left, I gave everyone a quick hug goodbye, including him. He didn't walk me to the car. And since then? Nothing. The shouting at home hasn't stopped either. He gets angry over the smallest things. He's been pushing me, physically. It's embarrassing, especially when he does it in public. He shoves me aside, even if I'm just trying to pay at the store, despite us alternating who covers the bill. I've told him time and time again, this isn't how I want to be treated. I've told him that my parents didn't treat each other like this. I've asked him, no, begged him to stop yelling at me. I've begged him not to push me. And when I reach my breaking point, I threatened to involve his older brother. I'm sure I'm extra upset right now. The stress of the wedding, the pressure of work, it's all building up, and maybe I'm overreacting. But something in me knows I can't just let this slide. I can't pretend everything's okay. Am I just overthinking this? Could it be just a stress response? Or is this something deeper? I'm at a crossroads. What would you advise if this was your sister in my shoes? I'm feeling lost. I love my husband, but I don't know where to go from here. To clarify, about the incident where he put his hand on my throat, we were in the middle of a massive argument. I was upset, feeling like he hadn't consulted with me before leaving his last job. The financial pressure was getting to me, and I snapped. But the thing is, he had already mentioned it before. I had been supportive. I just forgot. In that moment, I yelled. And he yelled back. He grabbed me by the throat, only for a moment, and then he let go and walked away. When we talked afterward, he admitted it was wrong. He apologized, saying he'd been incredibly frustrated because I was yelling at him over something I had agreed to just days before. But still, it was wrong. It was terrifying. It made me sick. I had to come to terms with the fact that it's never okay. He apologized, but I still don't know what to do. What is happening? He didn't back down, not at first. The tension hung in the air thick and suffocating. There was no retreat, not from him, just escalation. It was at that moment, standing in front of him, that I picked up the phone and called my dad. I needed someone to know, to hear what was happening. I need to tell you everything, I said. And I did. I spoke of the escalating cruelty, the harsh words that cut deeper each time. I told him about the incident, the throat grab. And I wasn't finished yet. The shove in public. Everything. I could feel the weight of his eyes on me as I spoke, his presence an oppressive force. He was whispering in my ear, telling me I was making this worse, dragging my family into it. But I wasn't listening anymore. I had to stand up, and my dad needed to know everything. Then, the phone call wasn't over. I had his eldest brother on the line, hearing it all, my voice quivering but resolute. His response? Confusion and condemnation. His brother's actions were unjustifiable, and he spoke on it clearly. As we hung up, my husband, ever the manipulator, began pouring honey in my ear. I'm sorry, he said, over and over, as though his words alone could erase the fear I felt. He begged for another chance, insisted that we could avoid the wedding collapse. He promised to change. But could I trust those promises? His mother and eldest brother were coming to mediate, to fix what had been broken. I called my parents immediately. They were furious, especially at the idea that his family would try to settle matters. They didn't trust him to lead the way. But I still had faith in his brother. And yet, in the pit of my stomach, doubt gnawed at me. I called a friend to stand by me, knowing I would need support. She was there before my in-laws, and together, we confronted the truth. My friend had the courage to say what needed to be said, pointing out how my husband had minimized the violence, had refused counseling. How could I trust him after all of this? How could I trust him when he refused to even try? The yard felt cold as we waited for my brother-in-law and mother-in-law to arrive. When they did, the air shifted. My brother-in-law laid down the rules, no interruptions. It was my turn. I told my story plainly, but the weight of each word made it feel heavy. The phone notepad was my ally, my way of making sure nothing was forgotten, nothing would be twisted. I read out the threats, the fear, the anger that had filled the air. And then, it was his turn. He tried to justify the violence, tried to frame it as a reaction to my behavior. But I wasn't buying it. No, I clarified, my voice steady. You grabbed my throat in anger. His brother didn't flinch. He said what needed to be said. This was not something to be swept under the rug. The wedding, the reception, it didn't matter anymore. The relationship was broken, and it would either end or be rebuilt over time. The question was, could it ever be fixed? Could I ever trust him again? His brother's words were harsh but needed. His support wasn't just for me, it was a reminder that I didn't have to do this alone. As my husband packed his bags, I sat there, my heart a tangled mess of emotions. The weight of it all pressed down on me. But I wasn't alone. My brother-in-law had promised his support, and I had my friend. And I had my family. I wasn't the only one seeing the truth. I wasn't the only one who saw the scars. When it was over, when he was gone, I found solace in the small moments, the ones that reminded me I wasn't crazy, that I wasn't imagining things. I curled up in bed with my cat, seeking comfort in the quiet. Alhamdulillah, I whispered to myself, Grateful for the love and support that had come my way. Grateful for the people who cared. For my friends who saw me, who saw the change in me since I moved in with them. They had noticed how I had become less certain of myself, how I had lost my voice in the chaos. But they saw me now. They were proud of me for standing up. And as I sat there, reflecting, I knew the truth in my heart. The second a man lays hands on you in anger, it's over. There's no coming back. A commenter's words echoed in my mind. The second a man lays hands on you in anger, it's over. Don't pass go. Don't wait. Run. It was sound advice. The warning signs were there, and they had always been there. I wasn't going to ignore them anymore. And I wasn't going to pretend that everything would be fine if he just said he was sorry. Because, deep down, I knew he wouldn't change unless he truly committed to it. But until then, I had to think of myself. It was time to move on. And just like that, the weight lifted. The future was uncertain, but for the first time in a long time, I felt free.